Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast. Welcome back, listeners. Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. We love you guys. And
we do. Jimmy, do you love me? Do you love me?
You're not a patron, so that's questionable.
I just had to ask. We do thank each and every patron. We thank each and every listener, each and every person who promotes this podcast in some way.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And if you want to become a patron, I know we say this in the intro and the outro, but you can go to patreon.com/speakingout. Look at the different tiers. We have another Zoom coming up this month. We have one a month for people in the book club. We'll be discussing topics that are found in my book, and we had an excellent
that was awesome.
session.
I can't wait for the next one.
It was very lively, very
wonderful.
Good group,
yeah.
Awesome questions. In the news, again, we have Tavner Smith. He's a pastor at the seventh fastest growing megachurch in the United States. It was found out back in December, I believe, that he had an affair with a reported church staffer. I say affair. It's I'm sure there was all kinds of abuse, and he's back in the pulpit.
Mm-hmm. Pretty as a picture.
He put himself right back in the pulpit.
Right.
There's been all kinds of reports at this church, which is part of the, what's the network called? I keep forgetting it, so I'm going to have to look it up. The Association of Related Churches, ARC. This ARC has all these mega churches that are being planted all over the U.S., and it is absolutely rampant with all kinds of stories just like this.
Mm-hmm.
If their pastors...
Right.
Going wild, having the time of their lives with all these women.
Raking in the dough and just having a party, it seems.
And I think that, that's what we want to talk about in this episode is, just one, the lack of accountability that's in churches, small and large. The fact that there were 8 staff members who resigned in the wake of what they found out with Tavner Smith. There was a video that surfaced, and he was in a restaurant with a woman, not his wife, and he was making out with this woman. And that video got leaked out back to the church. There were 8 staff members who resigned, citing all kinds of issues. There were rumors of all kinds of inappropriate relationships that were going on with him, though they didn't know to what extent. But a lot of rumors were circulating.
Do you find it interesting that once something gets made public, then the dirt comes out, so to speak? Until then, there's a lid on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I understand why.
Excuse me.
You look at that, and these guys didn't have probably a whole lot of information to go on. And it is challenging when you hear little bits and pieces, rumors of things going on. And that's one of the things that I help churches with when I consult is, you almost have to find some kind of a smoking gun, because you want to back up these claims. When you know that something's amiss, that's why it's important to really talk to people and communicate and find out what's he doing, where are the boundaries that he's crossing, what specific boundaries is he crossing.
Did I not read in the articles about this church, his in particular, there is no eldership?
That's right.
I'm just about without a squeaky voice here. I apologize. I'll pop another cough drop in. Which means, I believe I read that, Jimmy, that there is no eldership to speak of?
That's right. So there's no
Okay.
accountability built
Right.
in, and that's this gentleman's name was. See if I can find it real quick. Colt Helton, Helton. Boy, that's awful close to Hinton, huh?
Yeah, too close. Yeah.
So apparently he used to work there, and he said, this is a Facebook post that Julie Roy's posted on an article, and we'll link to all this, but he said a post about Venu Church I've worked for with over 12 churches from North Point to Hillsong. I was hired by Venu Church in its early days to step up its systems and structures and model anything an adult would experience on a Sunday morning. In hindsight, I taught the Iranians how to make nuclear weapons. I gave a man who had very, very bad intentions the ability to make a megachurch. My issue is why I left. And then he goes on. Number one, there were 0 elders or accountability. The lead pastor had 100% absolute control, and his decision was divine. I just want to stop with. I'm going to stop at that point and really focus on that. Anytime that you have a church structure where there's a lack of accountability, think Mars Hill with Mark Driscoll. That was the core of the issue. Mark was, according to reports from former staffers, he was a tyrant.
Right.
Publicly, he had this image. He was this cool, hip, awesome megachurch pastor.
Very charismatic.
Yep.
Very,
great
likable.
speaker.
Right.
But behind closed doors,
Different person.
he was a jerk, and he was, he would berate people, and he would belittle people, and there was 0 accountability. Nobody could stand up to him, and I think that's the problem here. I'll link to this article. I just sent it to somebody yesterday, but I wrote it 2 years ago. An article titled, "Your church leaders don't have the amount of authority that they think they do."
Right.
These guys think that they are practically God in the flesh.
Well,
And
I think it's back to
gross.
what you have repeatedly said in podcast after podcast. They have as much power as we give them.
Yeah. And
And it's time for us to wake up and say, hey, this is not
enough
the
is
church.
enough. It's not
Yeah,
healthy.
this
It's
is not
right.
what God wanted
Yeah.
ever. So,
I mean, think about a family. When you have a tyrant that one of the spouses, pick one. When you have a tyrant who comes in and demands total control, who makes all the decisions, insists on making all the
I can
decisions.
think of a few families that I know that live under those circumstances.
Right. What do we call it? What's the word that we call it?
Abusive.
It's
They're
abuse.
abuse, yeah.
It's
Right.
abuse.
Absolutely.
They control the purse strings. They control all the money.
Right.
They give allowances to their spouses. Usually it's the husband does that to the wife. They control everything. They control the friends. Right.
That's
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's no different than these church leaders who control every narrative. And I found this really interesting because these people who resigned, these staffers who resigned, apparently they weren't elders because they didn't have any elders. So I don't know what their role was, but church leaders had suggested, or actually kind of demanded, that Tavner Smith take 1 year off, a minimum of 1 year,
Right.
so that they could kind of figure things out and, kind of do an investigation and find out, were there more people? What was at the root of the issue? And he flat out told them no. He said,
When I read that, and I saw he's back in the pulpit in 6 weeks, was it?
and he told them. He
Yeah.
said in that meeting,
Yeah.
"I'll be back in the pulpit in
Yeah.
February."
Yep.
He said, "I'll take a few weeks
Yeah.
off, but in
And
February I'll be
also,
back." He's back.
In his, boy, I cannot talk, confession to the congregants, he said, you may never know the whole story. Probably won't.
Yeah.
In fact, he pretty much assured them, you will really not ever know what truly happened. But I'm here. I love you. Thanks for taking me back.
Yeah.
End of discussion.
And we watched this, and it's been scrubbed from the church's Facebook page. Julie Roy's got a copy of it. She uploaded it to her YouTube channel. Then she put it in this article that she wrote. So we will link to that. But we watched it's a 5-minute video. Not a single tear.
He's so smiling. Much.
There's just this disconnect.
There's so much in that 5 minutes that if you step back and you watch it, you can understand, number one, why people get sucked in. Mm-hmm. Number two, when you look at him, he's very likable. He looks like a young, middle-aged guy.
He's got his ripped jeans. His both kneecaps are hanging out.
I looked at him and I thought, hey, he's appealing to people in their 30s and 40s and money people, obviously. Notice he doesn't wear anything formal. Shirt unbuttoned at the top. You
top 2 buttons, risque. Right. He's got his top 2 buttons unbuttoned.
You look at all those things and then you listen to him talk. He's a smooth talker. And then he charms everyone by telling them how wonderful they are, how kind,
how committed,
compassionate,
how smart, how much they love God.
And at the end, everybody's applauding him.
Yeah.
They're cheering him.
Yeah, a couple things stuck out, and we talked about this. The one thing that really stuck out is all these women who were in the background cheering him on. This guy
cheering him
had presumably, possibly multiple affairs. I don't like that word when it's related to a church leader. It's abuse. But for
about abusive affairs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And as he's up there talking, these women are like, they're clapping and they're cheering him on, and they're like, woo, woo. It sounds like you're at a concert, and you're like, this is a
really
heartbroken, the man who's absolutely destitute.
There was nothing that I saw that was heartbroken about him. He had a script. He stuck to the script. If you noticed, it was very well prepared, by the way. He's an excellent presenter. And bottom line is, hey, I messed up. He does not call it sin, by the way.
Nope.
At all. He didn't use the word sin once.
Actions. He said, I take full responsibility for my actions.
He did not.
But not every part of my story will be shared right away. Yep. Maybe some never. That's a direct quote.
And that's a direct quote. And he says that. And it's kind of like, here I am. I am back. Thank you for accepting me for who I am. And he says that in his apology.
Yeah.
I'm like you. I'm human. I can fall too. And I think people buy into that right away. Right away. It's like, hey, he's right. Notwithstanding the fact that he is a leader, supposedly a man of God who is what? Held to a higher standard. And I think we've tossed that out of the window in recent years. We really have. We've kind of tossed that out.
I'm going to look up Robert Cialdini, his book, The Influence, Science, and Practice. So there are certain catchphrases that are in his speech here that just, it makes me think of different references, different books. Like, this is all very manipulative. And like you said, if you don't understand psychology, you get sucked into this. And that's what
scripted,
it was really well crafted.
Oh yeah, very much.
But he said, I'm going to read a couple quotes that he said in his quote unquote confession this past Sunday, just a couple days ago. He said, at this point, you are all very well aware that I'm not perfect. Well, what's he doing there? It's that relatability. My goodness, none of us are perfect, Pastor.
Right. Absolutely.
You're well aware that I'm not perfect, but I do love God with my whole heart, and I do love you. Okay, so this phrase, I love you or I like you, that's one of the 6 principles in Robert Cialdini's book called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. It's called the likability factor because that one phrase, I like you, and there have been all kinds of studies on this, it makes people, I forget what the percentage is, it's like 70% more likely to do what you ask of them if you just use those 3 words, I like you.
Right.
And I think that's a fascinating study. But he's using all of these principles of persuasion. Here he says, "There's no excuse." This is a direct quote. "There's no excuse for my behaviors and the hurts I've caused." Again, he doesn't name what they are.
No, I kept waiting to hear what that was.
But I believe there is healing and walking out a brand new season. It's that hope of a future. This, I'm a changed man.
He actually says that he's changed, that God has done wonderful things with him
In
through
6
this.
weeks.
I know. I know. Yeah. He's brand new.
He's a brand new person.
He's brand new. But you're right, Jimmy. When somebody says, "I love you, I like you," you and I are just the same. What's that do? It puts us in the same court. And we do love it. We feel an affection towards that person. We feel a comradeship. You know, we're friends. We are friends. We're on the same playing ground.
Yeah, and there's this expert who's quoted in this article, Julie Roy's article, Dr. Julia Dahl, and she said, this completely ignores that his actions are at least temporarily, if not permanently, disqualifying, she said. There's no real repentance when the actions are, "I'm sorry," and on with the show.
Right.
And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to let people tell him he had to go.
There really wasn't even much of a pause, if you think about it.
No.
There wasn't much of a pause at all. It's
But what's interesting is he kept the platform the entire time.
Yes,
he maintained the
did.
control.
I know. Yeah. And he makes that clear.
Absolutely. Yeah, he doesn't deny
He's
it, but
calling the shots. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will be back.
I'll be back.
I will be back.
And God is good, I'm good, and
Yep.
you all are great.
Yep. I kind of chuckled when I listened to that part, and I thought, "You are smooth, mister. You're
Yeah,
a smooth
he is.
talker." Yeah. That sucks us right in.
But I think
time.
it's that manipulation and grasp for power, and I think a lot of people associate power grabs with really mean, nasty,
We do.
aggressive people.
We think of the preacher we showed a few episodes back, pounding,
right.
screaming, stomping,
Blatantly
kicking people
yep,
out.
arrogant. And-
Yeah, if you want to get out, get out. Blah. There's the opposite, which has a better effect.
Yes,
And
it
that's
does.
what this man used.
Yeah, people like Anderson won't ever grow mega churches because he'll keep enough
Yeah,
there that
right.
are a solid core, and
That's
they
his
will
little-
die with him
And they will.
on whatever hill he
And
creates.
they will. Right.
But he'll never have a mega church. Guys like Tavner Smith are brilliant.
They're like magnets, Jimmy. I look at him and I can see how he is a magnet. He really is. And if you're not real careful, you do get sucked in easily,
Yeah.
very easily.
But yeah, I mean, these are a couple of the points that I want to make as, as a pastor myself, as a church leader, I find it repulsive when pastors demand that people bow down to them, and that when they make statements like, "Well, all the leadership, the leadership's responsible for decision making in the church." Well, I mean, to an extent, but no. I mean, this is something that nobody had to say. This
Right.
was
Right.
Tavern Smith and Tavern Smith alone.
No.
He had the decision to return back to the pulpit, to be fully restored, to restore himself, and he holds the power, ironically, to kick other people out.
Yeah, which is being done.
I
This
know.
was being
It's-
done. Yeah.
It's
What
crazy.
is your take? Just curious, because you and I haven't discussed this. What is your take about him returning to the pulpit?
I don't think he should ever return to the pulpit.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people are like, "Well, but that's what he knows. He knows preaching, and how could he get another job?" Trust me, somebody is gifted at manipulating people and persuading people, and somebody who's a public speaker. Public speakers alone, pick a topic. If you become a public speaker and join the National Speakers Association, you'll make pretty good bank.
Oh, yeah.
If you pick a niche topic
Absolutely.
and you go out and you speak on that topic, you can make good money. It doesn't have to be anything, it shouldn't be anything spiritual,
Right.
period.
I just think of the detriment that he and all people like him, to the purity of what God expects his church family to be, to the what the church symbolizes, what
Yeah.
spiritual leaders symbolize. And when I see something like this, it's almost a mockery of sin. It isn't a true repentance. He doesn't use the word sin. There were no signs of sorrow, remorse, anything. He's right back. He's there.
And I want to say too, I mean, I think this is important too, that I'm a firm believer that people, no matter what the job is, a lot of us in all of our professions are underpaid.
Oh, yeah.
I'm underpaid. You're underpaid. We don't make a whole
Right.
lot of money. I think that everybody should get paid according to their skills and their abilities. But this is a case where these megachurch pastors, a lot of them, like him, like Smith, they're getting filthy rich off the backs of
Right.
other people, other hard-working people's incomes. So he's not really producing anything. From what I can tell, he's just preaching. He's a charismatic preacher. He knows how to get people to open up their wallets, and he knows how to get people in the door, and he knows how to, for the most part, keep people there. And he's making, there was a report in Julie's one article that court records show that he cleared $200,000 on salary. Him and his soon-to-be ex-wife, whatever she is now, they have 2 homes valued at $950,000. You have $1 million in homes. You have a $200,000 salary, and let me tell you, as a pastor, what's reported is not his salary.
Right.
Because what I report is my salary, which I put it in quotes. It is salary. For ministers, we're dual status, so we're considered both employed and self-employed for according to the IRS.
Right.
It's a weird.
It is very weird.
Very weird tax status.
Yeah, it is.
But what you report to the federal government as your wages, what we report to the IRS isn't anywhere close to what our actual salary is, because you factor in housing. So there's the housing allowance, and that helps counterbalance for the.
Low
I know I'm
income,
going off on like
actually,
kind of a
yeah.
weird soapbox, but I pay the full 15% or whatever it is for Social Security and Medicare, because I don't have an employer who pays 7.5%.
Exactly. Right.
So I pay the full, like I get
Right.
kind of killed on those kind of taxes. And so the IRS has this housing rule that if they didn't, like, I wouldn't, there's no way I'd be able to live. It's not affordable.
Right.
Off of the
And
salary
I think
that
the
I get.
point being made, when you have a person that's a manipulator and abuser, there's a difference there. There's a power that is formed. They know it, and they use it. And there's no accountability, as we were talking about. So the church grows in numbers, and I can kind of see how he attracts people. I mean, he's a very nice-looking man, youthful, very, very good speaker. And he's up there telling everybody, you are great people.
You're so
are
wonderful.
great people. You're wonderful. You're the best. By the way, can you throw in another $500 this week?
Yeah, I like how
And
before he gave his confession, he gives a talk about contributing.
Yes. And you caught that? Yeah. So
Crazy.
it is weird that we fall into this trap so often, that we look beyond what we really see, and we accept people like this far too often. And the sad part is, these people then, when they either fall off the hill or they go off in the wild blue yonder with somebody or something, the church gets left hanging, and the leadership just everything crumbles. And I think we've seen that over the past several years. We've seen what's happened in the Catholic Church, Southern Baptist churches. We see what's going on. The more power, the more money, and there seems to be an awful lot of abuse that goes with it.
Yeah, and I mean,
Awful lot of abuse.
look at these red flags, and this is going back to Colt Chandler Helton's post on Facebook. The issues why he left. Number one, as we mentioned, zero elders or accountability.
Right.
Number two, money issue. We were always told there was no money, but the lead pastor always had a new car every few weeks, and the shopping trips would blow your mind, from exotic dogs to shoe and jersey collections. Number three, physical abuse. I witnessed the worship pastor slam his wife against a wall in the green room prior to going on stage. And many of times verbal talk to her he would talk to her like she was a dog and scream and, submit to me, woman. Number four, mental abuse. I witnessed on many times. If someone saw or said anything about the money, accountability, or abuse, they were ran off, and everybody at the church was made to triangulate against the said person and attack them by calling their jobs, their friends, etc. So it's this harassment, and this culture is everywhere in the church. I'm starting to hear more and more stories of these levels of harassment, where church members, they bully other church members on behalf of the pastor. If that's not a toxic red flag,
it is. It's and
who
we
does that?
Sit here, we
That's
talk
insanity.
about it, and we keep, we can talk till we're blue in the face, and it continues to go on. It continues. And you've got to ask yourself, why? What's the deal? Well, it's master manipulation. That's what it is.
Number five, I witnessed on many times the lead pastor have quote-unquote alone time with females on the worship team and congregation. Number six, theology. That would change on a weekly basis and quickly turn into a prosperity gospel viewpoint. Number seven, when I went to report the physical abuse, I was told I was not allowed to speak to the lead pastor unless I was spoken to. This is what I mean.
Yeah.
This is a cult. This is not church. This is a cult.
Right. It is.
When you're told,
it's a brainwashing.
You're not allowed to speak to the pastor unless he speaks to you first. I mean, it reminds me of Esther, right? That scene in Esther.
Yes.
You don't speak to the king unless the king holds out his scepter, and only then can you speak to the king. These guys aren't kings.
No.
But they sure think
I don't
they
know.
are.
It saddens me, because, like I say, it's so far away from what the church should be, from what God's family should be. And in my thinking, I think that's why so many people have left the church.
It is.
That the people that recognize this have gotten so discouraged, disgusted, just, everything you can think of, and they throw their hands up and say, why bother? If this is the church. I just talked to somebody last week who said that to me. They said, if that's the church, I don't want anything to do with it. And it's heartbreaking. It really is. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
Because that's not what God's church is. This is some churches. It's not all churches, not all bodies of believers, but I think the big mega churches set this whole ball of fire rolling. They really do.
Well, and I think because that structure, that culture has to be there. This worship of the pastors, this putting them on a pedestal, building a church around the personality of the lead pastor, that has to remain intact. Otherwise, people have freedom to think, freedom to speak, freedom to act.
Yes.
And those church leaders don't want that. And so they maintain tight control.
Right. In a smaller group, such as you have in Somerset, when you interact with people, they get to know you. You get to know them. You eat meals together. You picnic together. You go on hikes together. You know each other. Something like this, you meet in this massive building, And there's a glamour to that, really.
Well,
when
you feel honored if
You
you
do.
get to be one who gets to hang out
Yes.
with pastor.
Yep.
Then, oh my goodness,
and
like
yeah.
that's like
And
it's
I
like a high
think
honor. It's just so weird.
I think
It's
that's
so
what
beyond
people
my recognition that
yes and
I don't get it.
no. It's a trap, and Satan's good at setting
is.
traps. That's all there is to it. Satan's really smart at setting traps. But, would you rather worship in a little country bumpkin church with a little country bumpkin preacher, or would you like to be up on this big hill in
Have
this
your cup
massive,
filled.
yeah,
My spiritual cup is
and
being
have
filled.
all the newest technology and sound systems and everything, lights and paved driveways and all that up on the hill, and ushers to usher you in and to usher the children this
Yep.
way and all? Or would you want to be in the little white church down in the valley?
Where you can't get volunteers to teach your kids on Sunday morning.
And everybody's
Yeah.
tired and weary, and the enthusiasm runs low. Here you're getting fed this cup of enthusiasm every week.
Told
and-
how wonderful you are, how
Yeah.
great you
So
are.
do you see it? People buy into that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I see the
Yeah.
appeal.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
I don't
I think
either.
it's
No.
most of it's fakery.
No. It's just.
But I think where we begin, and we're kind of up against the clock, but I think what we need to start doing is dismantling this cult-like leadership model,
Right.
where the buck stops with the leaders, whether it's in the case of this church where it's just the pastor, or where you have churches with an elder board, where they say the buck stops with us. No,
Right.
it doesn't.
Right.
Go,
Right.
go take a hike, because no, it doesn't. And we
Yes.
need to start telling them that. And, I can't imagine in my wildest dreams, I can tell you guys just based on our church culture, if I ever took that position and told people, you don't speak unless spoken to, that all decisions stop with me, they start with me, they stop with me, I can tell you, I'd be preaching to all empty chairs.
You'd be picked up by the collar and walked out the door.
Right.
And rightly so.
Right, exactly.
Rightly so.
It's just
But,
so strange how people.
If there's a
tolerate it.
golden nugget of wisdom to impart to people who are in a situation like this, there's a lot of. I know that there are listeners who are in situations like this, where it's an abusive situation. What's that golden nugget you could leave people with? What do we do?
Yeah.
Where do you begin?
Yeah. Number one, communicate your feelings to other people, and not just feelings, but what you're actually witnessing. Things like that, where you have somebody who's preaching that the church has no money. Don't buy these narratives.
Right.
Say, as a concerned member, my goodness, if we don't have money, can I see a budget report?
Right. That's
Get something that's concrete that backs that claim up,
Right.
instead of accepting everything the pastor says is gospel. Look for facts, look for evidence, and call people out on that. If the budget report shows that this church, which I think it's in pretty darn good financial straits right now, if that's the case, then call people on that. Publicly call people on
Right.
that.
I
And
was going to say, lift the blinders and take about 5 steps back, and oh, my voice is going. See,
oh, Granny, you've reached your
Really?
limit.
Yeah, I have. Really see things as they are.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, open your eyes, and if it's safe to get out, and that's your only option, then
Right.
get out. But
Right.
but don't just quietly leave. Let people know why you left. Voice your concerns, because so many good people leave the church very, very broken, and they've been so intimidated and run down by people like Tavner Smith that they're so afraid to speak up. They're so afraid to voice their opinion. They're so afraid of being labeled, a gossip and ruining
a
the church
troublemaker,
and a troublemaker and all
a
this
church
stuff.
splitter.
And I assure you, in toxic cultures like this, the toxicity And the damage is coming from the pastor, not you from speaking up about
Right.
all of this stuff.
And there are really godly churches that worship. And I know when we seek that, God will help us find that church.
Yeah, they're
For
out
sure.
there.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, this is not one of those godly churches.
No.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning
Yes.
into this episode, and we will catch you next episode.
You will. Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the rewards our patrons receive.